next section, we're going to talk about childhood development. There are three aspects of childhood development: physical, cognitive, and moral. Today we're going to start with physical. Physical development is based on a combination of genetics and environment. There are many environmental factors that can affect development and birth size. Maternal nutrition: a lot of women will avoid caffeine, sushi, deli meat, things like this. Stress, diseases, age of the mother, use or non-use of alcohol, cigarettes, and drugs. All of these things are environmental factors that can affect development and birth size. So let's talk about the stages of development. We're going to cover from conception to age 2. We're going to start with the zygote stage. This is from conception to 2 weeks. So this is the first 2 weeks after conception, and this is when the fetus gets 23 chromosomes from each parent. The chromosomes create the genetic blueprint. This is hair color, eye color, height, propensity to be overweight, skin color. There are also diseases that are genetic and passed on from parents. So all of these details come from the 23 chromosomes that the zygote inherits from each parent. From 2 to 8 weeks is called the embryo stage. This is when the foundations are built. This is the foundations of the brain, the foundations of the spinal cord, the nervous systems. These become established within the first 8 weeks. The heart begins to beat. The backbone and the muscles begin to form. The arms, legs, eyes, and ears, those all begin to grow within the first 8 weeks in this embryo stage. The bulk of development is known as the fetus stage. This is from 8 to 38 weeks. So everything present in a full-grown adult is developed in this fetus stage. You find everything in a fetus that you're going to find in a full-grown adult. The fetus sleeps, it wakes up, it exercises, turns its head, opens and closes its mouth, all of these things. Once the baby is born, that's called the neonate stage, from birth to 2 years. So by 10 months, the child imitates word sounds and actions. By 14 months, he understands that he can make things happen by his actions, so cause and effect. By 16 months, she enjoys games and songs, and then all of a sudden at 18 months, the vocabulary explodes. So let's talk about developmental stage. Going back to that prenatal development, prenatal being before birth, you have 3 12-week periods. These are called trimesters. Your first trimester is the absolute most critical time. Most women will not publicly disclose their pregnancy within the first trimester because that's when the embryo is most susceptible to environmental effects. That is when miscarriages are most likely to happen, unfortunately. In this first trimester, the development of the central nervous system takes place. The second trimester, to the second 12-week period, this is when the fetus becomes capable of physical movement. Muscle and bone develop. Body growth begins. Fingers and toes develop. The fetus develops these reflexes such as sucking and swallowing. So all of this is going on in that second 12-week period. But it's the third trimester, that last 12-week period, that is the most growth, especially of the brain. This is the most growth for the fetus. In this stage, the fetus can see and hear. The bodily systems are fairly well developed except for the respiratory system. The lungs are not fully developed until the 9th month. That's why it is so critical that the fetus stay in the womb and not be born premature. When babies are born premature, they are often admitted into the NICU. Sometimes they're in the incubator to help their lungs develop and all these things because the lungs aren't fully developed until the 9th month. Once the baby is born, that's the neonatal, so the newborn stage from birth to 2 years. When they're born, they average about 7 pounds and 19.5 inches long. Males tend to be slightly heavier and longer than females at birth. The baby grows 10 to 12 inches within the first year alone. By age 2, the child has reached 50% of his or her adult height. Newborns grow so much. A newborn will gain an average of an ounce a day. The weight doubles by 4 months, triples by 1 year, and quadruples by 2 years. In general, infants will develop according to these steps. However, it's just a generalization. Everybody develops at their own pace. Within 6 months, the baby can sit up on their own. Within 8 months, they start to creep. Within 10 months, they start to crawl. 12 months, they start to stand on their own. And by 13 months, they're starting to walk. However, things happen earlier and later because children develop at their own pace. Preschool development. This is 2 to 6 years. So physical growth slows down. Most of the growth is going to be in that neonatal stage. So in preschool, it slows down, but it's still very obvious. There's still lots of changes from 2 to 6 years. By age 3, the average child weighs 32 pounds and is 38 inches tall. By age 6, the average child weighs 48 pounds and is 48 inches tall. The child moves from gross motor skills, meaning using things with the whole hand or the whole arm, to small or fine motor skills, which is using the fingers. So children can throw a big ball or catch a big ball before they can use scissors, before they can grasp a pencil properly, things like that. When you see children start to work with pencils and crayons, they'll go from using their whole hand to manipulating the fingers more. That shows the development of the fine motor skills. Children in this age of development need a lot of physical activity. The middle childhood development is from 6 to approximately 12 years. And I'm going to talk about the 12-year age mark in a second. The physical growth is slow but steady. Still obvious changes being made. By the end of this stage, the average child is 5 feet tall and around 80 pounds. But girls at this point tend to be taller and heavier. So boys tend to be longer and heavier when they're born. But by age 12, by puberty, girls tend to be taller and heavier. Children continue to refine muscle and motor skills during this period, but the most growth and change is in the cognitive domain. That's how we learn and how we perform cognitively. Adolescent. So the adolescent development is from 11 to 18. So there's some overlap with the middle childhood development, which is 6 to 12, and the adolescent development, which is 11 to 18. So there's a little bit of overlap there. Because people do things at their own rate. Girls actually tend to reach the adolescent stage earlier. They tend to reach it at 10 and a half years, whereas boys come in a little bit later. They're closer to 12 and a half years. This development stage is asynchronous. That means things don't happen at the same time. So extremities, feet, hands, arms, legs, grow before the trunk does, for example. This gets you that awkward and clumsy stage. You have oil glands and sweat glands increasing their productivity, so you've got pimples and changes with skin tone. You also have the development of sex characteristics. The primary sex characteristics, those related to reproduction, have a lot of changes in this area, but also your secondary sex characteristics occur. That's your facial hair and your breast development. All of this is in that adolescent stage between anywhere from as young as 10 and a half to 18 years of age. However, some have noted that physical and sexual changes are occurring at earlier ages than the previous generation. There's a belief that this is due to the level of antibiotics that we have in our food. It's changing how quickly we develop. But it's definitely noted that these changes are occurring earlier. So that covers all the stages of physical development. Next, we will go with cognitive development, and we'll talk about moral development after that. Let me know if you have any questions.